height, width, and depth. These three dimensions form the foundation of how we view the world, and video games, by this point, have largely been able to replicate that experience. In fact, it's kind of hard to believe that just a few short decades ago, the entire medium utilized only two of these dimensions. And developers got pretty good at it, with later 16-bit games pushing these dimensions to their absolute limits. But as the hardware kept improving and the developers kept experimenting, it was becoming clear that the addition of depth would be no simple task. Gaming was essentially back at square one, and developers needed a guide to show them how to navigate this new dimension. That guide was Mario. Hi there, my name is Daniel, and I think Super Mario 64 is pretty creative. Okay, so Mario wasn't actually the first name in 3D gaming. There were a slew of other franchises that technically beat him to it, but just like 2D games before Super Mario Bros., it was the Wild West out there in terms of quality. There were some great ideas among this bunch, but with no standard for how to navigate a 3D environment, a lot of them were kind of all over the place and haven't really aged well as a result. Some focused their attention on the 3D models themselves while still maintaining a linear, two-dimensional gameplay system. And others, while they may have experimented with open, explorable spaces, weren't the most polished products on the market. They were starting to tap into the potential of the third dimension, but there really weren't any games that felt like they truly captured that potential. That is, until 1996, when Mario's 3D shoes stepped onto the scene. And it wasn't just Mario. The Nintendo 64 itself was also brand spanking new. So, as gamers reluctantly approached this new console, they had their favorite mustached plumber to help them get acclimated. Because these weren't just 3D models and a fancy new whatever this is. It was the opportunity to create a new type of experience for players. You see, what set Super Mario 64 apart from its competition at the time was its willingness to ask the question, how does 3D open up new possibilities? In their first handful of titles, Shigeru Miyamoto and the Mario team had expertly refined the series' mechanics, platforming, and exploration, and the addition of this third dimension meant new opportunities for all three. For starters, Mario's movement mechanics had to be updated. Natural, organic movement has been an important feature of Mario's design since day one, and with the standard of immersion and realism raised with 3D models, his set of movements needed to be expanded to match that. Mario needed to actually feel alive, which is why so much work was put into even the small things like his idle animations. And then of course there's Mario's jump, which is more expressive here than ever before. He can high jump, triple jump, long jump, wall jump, side jump, and dive jump. Oh, and ground pounding, he can do that too. Heck, he can even punch, kick, and throw objects, which are nice alternatives to jumping on enemies, given you now have to factor in depth. This expanded moveset made up the core of Mario 64's development and was actually fully fleshed out before a single stage was completed. And while a lot of this is probably old news for you at this point, I really can't get over how unprecedented Mario's moves were at the time. But while the game's mechanics have certainly been upgraded in this title, it's the game's stage design that has arguably seen the largest shift. Now that Mario was no longer confined to side-scrolling movement, Miyamoto knew that every player's impulse would be to explore whatever space they were in. And rather than trying to fit that impulse into their previous linear stage design, Nintendo used it to completely overhaul their approach to Mario stages. In previous games, each stage was home to maybe one or two gimmicks and was a linear route from start to finish. There might be some branching paths or secret exits here and there, but the goal was almost always to move from left to right until you reach the end, at which point you move on and leave the level behind. The earlier games didn't even let you return to previous stages, and even in later games like World, the only reason you would need to would be to unlock an alternate path or stock up on a specific power-up. Each was an individual step on a prescribed path through the game's world, and because of that, there were dozens of them. But in Super Mario 64, you've got 15 main stages total, not including some side areas here and there. and each of these stages are open and explorable with a number of different objectives to accomplish. These objectives can range from defeating a boss to things like collecting 8 red coins or overcoming a platform challenge. And the reward is always the same, a Power Star. These guys used to make Mario invincible, but now they act as your primary means of progressing through the game. The narrative rationale is that since Bowser has kidnapped Peach and taken over a castle, Mario needs to use the power of the stars to unlock specific doors and face off against him. You unlock 4 of these big doors throughout the game, and each time you're free to gather any stars from any of the stages you've unlocked. That means you could theoretically get the 30 stars to fight Bowser twice simply from completing stages found within this first room. But trust me, you're going to want to experience every stage this game has to offer. Most take on a well-worn archetype of Mario stages, but this time, they're literally just sandboxes for you to play around in. In fact, I found these stages especially unique in light of later series games. Your 6, technically 7, objectives in each world are not usually linked by a narrative thread like they would be in Sunshine and Galaxy. So for the most part, you could pretty much accomplish them in whatever order you please. But unlike Odyssey, which had so many power moons, it literally left some out in the open for you. Each of Mario 64's missions feels purposefully designed to give you a quick blast of platforming action. Filling 15 stages with half a dozen interlinking objectives is no small feat, and the developers clearly knew players would be spending a lot more time in these worlds than in previous titles. Mario now has a health gauge, which allows him to tank more than 1 or 2 hits. And for the first time in the series, we don't have a timer for completing stages. Add to that Mario's new power-ups, which work a bit differently this time around. Those actually are on a timer and can only be found at specific blocks throughout the various worlds. The Metal Cap and Vanishing Cap are pretty situational, but the Wing Cap, which you might have guessed from the box art, is really the standout here. In a game focused on exploration, the ability to literally fly around stages feels amazing. Oh yeah, and you could basically be Tony Hawk if you find one of these guys. But let's back up a bit, because we gotta talk about Peach's castle. Previous platformers have held their levels in some sort of stage select screen for the player to easily navigate. Some games gave us a fancy world map, whereas others let us choose how we wanted to progress. Oh, and some did both. But Mario 64 introduced this new fancy thing called the Hub World. This physical space connects the game's stages in the same way a selection screen would, but it does so seamlessly, which allows for deeper immersion. Sure, it might take a little longer to physically run from stage to stage rather than simply selecting one from a menu, but Peach's castle allows the game's world to feel like a living, breathing place. Plus, it provides a much-needed playground to practice the game's deeper mechanics before jumping into each painting. Don't tell me you've never spent half an hour being around the castle after booting up the game. It's okay, we all have. All of these elements, the complex mechanics, explorable stages, and nonlinear progression, converge to create an entirely new subgenre of gaming. More 3D platformers would spring up over the years, and their iterations on Mario 64's collectible-based gameplay would earn them the title of collectathons. Mario walked so these guys could run, and even the plumber himself would call back to this adventure time and time again. One of those times came when Mario 64 was remade for the Nintendo DS. Aside from the ridiculous title, this remake actually brought quite a few fun additions to the original game. 30 stars were added, bringing the total up to 150, and you collect those stars as 4 playable characters this time. That's right, y'all. L is real, and Yoshi's more than just a completion bonus. And then there's Wario. This version was my first experience with the game back in the day, so it's got a special place in my heart. But to best experience the magic of Super Mario 64, I would personally recommend the original release. The vanilla game can feel a bit dated in some areas, particularly regarding the camera. But as a whole, Mario's first foray into 3D holds up great today, which is a testament to its solid design. It was a pioneer, a forerunner, a new standard for aspiring developers to meet as they ventured into this new era of game design. It met the ambitious yet inconsistent competition of the day with a confidence that would be reflected in later Nintendo titles like Metroid Prime and Breath of the Wild. The excellence of Super Mario 64 seems effortless, but in reality, this timeless masterpiece would not have been possible without years of brainstorming, workshopping, and experimentation. Miyamoto and his team were risking Nintendo's largest IP on an idea that could have totally flopped. It required boldness, commitment, and most of all, vision to pursue what this new game could be, rather than playing it safe and simply just emulating what had already been done. That's why we remember Super Mario 64. Not just because it still holds up as an enjoyable, masterfully crafted experience in and of itself, but because of what it provided for gaming at large. That idea of legacy, of what I'll leave behind, is haunting, but also encouraging to me. How am I using the time I've been given? Am I invested in creating real change? Or am I content to leave the world around me just the way I found it? Questions like this tend to hit me with a lot of pressure, like it's my responsibility to change the entire world with my very limited influence. But I don't think it has to be that way. Miyamoto's team probably didn't have this grandiose vision in every single move they made with this game. I imagine they were instead guided by a simple vision and made small, individual choices that conformed to that vision along the way. So how can you and I make small, individual choices to speak life and love to those around us today? I'd like to dedicate this episode to my buddy Austin, who creates a culture of love through simple acts of service. You reflect the servant-hearted nature of our God in the little things you do, man. And you encourage me to invest in a deeper purpose for the people and spaces I've been given in my life. Thank you. And for the rest of you friends, I want you to know that you are loved, you're valuable, and you are creative. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.